So, it's been a while since I made a video. Fucking lot is happening and it keeps happening and I can't. I've had to draft so many legal filings in the last week and a half. I haven't really had much time for anything else. And, if I was paranoid, I might say that's part of their strategy is to just wear me down and waste all my time battling these procedural fucking nonsenses. And you know what? It's working. That's their strategy. It's fucking working, dude. I am fucking exhausted. Stressed the fuck out. Sick of this shit. But I've also got some tools of brewing. And so in the midst of all this struggle, I've sort of finalized my political philosophy, which I have been. Do you want to come out, buddy? Go ahead. Go. Come on. Go if you're gonna go. What are you doing? Jesus. Yeah. So finalize my finalize the basis of my political philosophy, and I posted a piece of it on X, and I created this nice little visualization to sort of help try to demonstrate. But basically, it basically adds a third dimensional axis to the existing political spectrum. So you have the left-right spectrum, right? Which is, let me try to break this down for you and make it real simple as to my reasoning here. So if you have the left-right and one represents conserving the established order and one represents, liberalism of changing the order for the sake of trying to progress. Okay. Well, then the Nolan chart introduced the concept that there is actually a second dimension, right? So in addition to your x-axis, you have your y-axis. And on the y-axis, you have a scale between authoritarian and anarchist, right? So you could have total ruthless government control or no government anarchy, right? Now, what I propose is a third dimension, which is the dimension of depth, approaching truth. So a lot of rhetoric gets thrown around, a lot of opinions, right? And what I propose is that there is an actual truth, and that it creates this sort of funnel structure, and that if you check the visualization on my X, you can sort of see what I'm talking about. But the point is in the center, and it creates a funnel, and you might wonder, well, why is it a funnel and not like a cylinder or something? Well, because facts are facts, right? There is not multiple truths. There are lots of opinions, but only one thing is true, right? And so as you approach the truth, you narrow in on a single point, right? Now, it's a funnel because ideally the truth should be balanced, right? In most cases. Obviously, there's exceptions, and I'll get into that. Actually, because I haven't shared what my full model is actually going to look like, because it's a lot more than a political model. It's actually a model for social, natural social. I have to give it a name still, because I don't think a model like this actually exists. But anyway, let me just finish my funnel analogy before I get off track too much. But so if you take that original one-dimensional scale, the left and right, and you say sometimes you always try to conserve the political order, some people try to conserve the political order, and some people try to change it using progressivism, right? Well, the truth is that actually sometimes preserving the current order is useful, right? Because sometimes what you have is good and worth protecting, and also if there's too much change, it creates chaos, right? But sometimes you need to change the existing order because the existing order is insufficient or damaged or corrupt in some way, right? And so the real answer lies in the middle, right? Take your y-axis, right? Now, you could have total authoritarianism, right? But that would be oppressive of the individual. And you could have total anarchy, but then that would also ironically lead back to authoritarianism eventually as groups take power and there would be chaos and there would be no order, right? So the truth is again somewhere in the middle, and this is why I propose a funnel, is because as you go down into the depth of exploring these topics, and this philosophy challenges you, by the way, to actually look at the other side of the spectrum's perspective and dig down into find what the actual truth is, right? Rather, and this is going to sound extreme because people aren't used to thinking like this, but this is a serious, just an example of an extreme position that you have to question, right? So on the right, you have to question, instead of demonizing like the trans people, right, you have to question, well, what is the underlying cause of this? And it may not be that the trans thing is right, but there may be some psychological process underneath it that explains why people are doing this, and until we dig into it, we won't be able to uncover that and find that balance, right? Take something extreme also like the Nazis, right? Now, obviously, most people are, not going to endorse being a Nazi, but nonetheless, instead of demonizing the Nazis, what if you actually considered what their point was, right? And understand that there is a reason why people reach that kind of a situation and actually contend with the idea, and then you may find a balance, right? And so, in other words, my point here is that to demonize your political opponent is actually what creates polarization and extremism, and what actually creates balance and justice in the world is by challenging or contending with the ideas that you don't like and finding the deeper truths underneath them, so that we can all come to a point in the center of agreement and balance, right? Now this funnel, this cone shape, only represents sort of the socio-political, because it's more than politics at this point. And I actually break the funnel into 3 categories. And so at the top is sort of like the economics and rhetoric. So like the political, like spending money, promoting ideas, commercials, advertisements. In the middle is law, right? So, and basically what happens is that things funnel down toward the bottom. So law is created through the top level process of, spending money, pushing rhetoric, making speeches. So the stuff at the top funnels into creating things in the middle, the legal system. And then at the bottom, toward the tip of the funnel, that is where morality, that is the realm of morality, like what actually is true, what actually is right, and what actually is wrong, right? And so there's an interesting piece to this, because my conception is essentially that the pieces toward the bottom, so the law and then further the morality layer, are more difficult. So as you go down, the more difficult it becomes to change or affect. So it's like it solidifies to some degree, or it becomes dense. It's almost like gravity. Like it's harder to change the underlying moral substructure of a civilization than it is to spend a bunch of money and try to push for new legislation, right? But if you achieve, each layer above sort of has this synergistic or natural influence over the layer beneath it, right? But if you achieve changing the legislation, after enough time passes, that legislation may change the underlying moral substructure of your culture, right? Now, obviously, it's more complex than a simple, straightforward funnel, and there are situations where, the moral order will change abruptly, like in the case of like some extreme event, like famine or war. Oh, that's an interesting bug. Shit. Well, I guess he's inside now. Yeah. But the idea is that this is sort of the natural progression, barring extreme circumstances. And the final piece of my model, so the idea is to introduce this funnel concept first because it's easier to conceptualize. But in actuality, the real world is a lot more complex than a simple funnel. There's a lot of different dynamics. There's a lot of different tensions and ways that this can become distorted, right? And so in order to extend this model, so first, it's like teaching the atom, right? The model of the atom isn't how an atom really looks, but you teach a simplified model so that people sort of grasp the concept. Then you teach them quantum mechanics and go into all the messy complexities, right? So it's sort of like that. But if I might lose some of you if you guys aren't familiar with, spin physics or toroidal fusions or any, like, what are those, not fusions, toroidal, I think they're called fission bubbles. I can't remember. In any case, there's toroidal physics, right? And if you know what a torus is, it's basically a donut, right? But it's like a dynamic spinning donut. So like the energy field around the Earth is a torus, right? The magnetic field, that is, and you can't see it, unfortunately. So I can't really give you a visual on that, but. The galaxy is sort of like a flattened torus, right? It's like this long spiral, and it's got like this sort of energy. But if you could imagine, this funnel is like the entrance of a torus, and it comes in at a point, right? And that point is almost like a black hole. It's a singularity, right? But in toroidal physics, then the energy comes out the bottom, so there's a mirrored funnel at the bottom, right? So you have these three layers on top. They come once you reach the center point, once you reach some sort of balance or truth, then it comes out the bottom, and it creates new moral structures and new laws and new political rhetoric and economic incentives, right? And then in a toroidal fashion, it sort of spins around and funnels back into the top, right? And so this is the idealized structure of a balanced society. But then you can also model an unhealthy society. So if the toroidal physics breaks down in our Earth's magnetic system, for example, the Earth is going to be in trouble. We're going to get bombarded with radiation from the sun, right? So it's very important that we maintain balance. And in the same way, it's very important that we maintain this toroidal balance in this what would you even call it? Socio-philosophical, political structure. I don't know. I'm going to have to come up with a better term because, like I said, I don't think a complete model of human interaction actually exists at this point. But in any case, the whole point is to create a model that you can actually measure and create real hard data points on how healthy or unhealthy your civilization is. So imagine if the point at the center stretches too much, right? We can't agree on what the truth is, kind of like where we are right now. And the point sort of extends outward. Well, in toroidal physics, if the center point becomes too expanded, then the whole thing collapses, right? So the whole structure, the whole torus collapses. Same with the law. If the law becomes too restrictive in the center of the funnel and it pinches, right, that destroys the dynamics in a similar fashion, and the whole thing falls apart, right? Or if too much money is funneled into political rhetoric at the top and the rim stretches too far, the entire structure collapses, right? So this is a model to sort of create, like you could literally create, if you could create data points for each of these three layers, you could literally create a model to visualize and feed data into it and have maybe like advanced AI to like help you put it together into like a complex visualization. But you could basically visualize the health of your society, right? And so instead of people arguing about what's right or wrong or what needs to be done or what doesn't need to be done, we can actually visualize where we are. Are we not agreeing on what truth is? Is the point in the center becoming expanded and at risk of collapse? Or are the laws becoming too restrictive, right? Or is the rhetoric becoming too extreme and stretching the top? Or perhaps the funnel in the middle is stretching out because we can't agree on how to apply the law and the law is being misapplied, right? There's lots of different ways that points in the center, middle, or top could expand or contrast to a point where the whole system becomes unstable, right? And the whole idea is not to prescribe what the truth is, because even though I do believe that truth exists and there are right and wrong answers, I also understand that coming to those answers is extremely difficult and in some cases nearly impossible, right? And so what you need is a system to try and find a balance, to a self-correcting system that can renegotiate or readjust itself, right, quickly and dynamically, right? We live at such a scale now that the systems we created in the past, they don't work at this scale. Like the justice system that was designed 250 years ago, before computers and before mass surveillance and before all these insane technologies, it doesn't scale. The courts are overwhelmed. You know, the legal system is abused and ignored in a lot of cases unless you can pay to play, right? People basically don't have their rights protected because it's not efficient enough, right? And so what we really need is a system that is a lot more dynamic and a lot more scalable to such a large capacity. What we really have in society today, despite all our social, political, legal corruption, moral corruption, there's corruption at all layers, right? The whole torus is collapsing right now, or I would at least argue. And so what we really have, though, is a not even a technology problem, it's a philosophy problem. We have forgotten what's important. We don't have philosophical, mental models, logical models for how to conceptualize a world of this complexity, right? We've always lived in small tribes. I mean, even when things got a little bit bigger, there was more chaos, but we sort of built these judicial systems and these political systems that sort of, kind of, not really, but at least appeared to address some of the issues and sort of created a, kind of balance. Some people would say, the systems of the past were never perfect and never just, and I would agree. But nonetheless, they did find some level of balance in order to continue to this point, right? But now we're at a level where nothing that exists is enough to address the modern problems. And yet people are so obsessed with their political rhetoric or their position or their moral positions or their legal positions that they can't. The innovators of the past, the great minds of the past, just don't exist anymore. And they're replaced by grifters like Elon Musk, who pretend to be super smart. And, I'm sure Elon Musk does have some level of intelligence, but the more and more I observe his behavior, the more it seems like most of his intelligence is put into fooling people, into making him think he is a lot smarter than he actually is, or taking credit for other people's work, right? Which is really what we reward in this society. If you're actually intelligent in this society, like me, then you end up in a situation like this, nearly totally isolated. And I'm not the only person like this. I know I have a friend out in the county this way who is one of the smartest dudes I've ever met personally. He's a chemist, genius, does all these crazy experiments, grows most of his own food, built his own house, does all kinds of cool stuff, has his own lab. And he's also pretty isolated. True intelligence is not rewarded. They want you to think it is because they want you to think we live in this super advanced society, right? But actually, the geniuses and the intellectuals are being suppressed right now in favor of the political extremists, the royal class, as I term it in my writing, of these people spending billions of dollars, right? And there basically is no agreement on morality, right? And so what we actually need is we actually need to support our intellectuals. We actually need to support the people that can solve these problems. We need to stop promoting grifters to demagogue-like status like Elon Musk, and we need to actually appreciate people who are genuinely intelligent and who can actually offer solutions to this problem, independent of whether or not those solutions are immediately economically viable. And I know I'm doing the bird hands right now. I just caught myself doing the bird hands. But it's only because it's very serious. It's a very serious problem, and it's not one we're going to solve with any of our previous tools. And so part of the reason for proposing this new model is to give us new tools to conceptualize so that we can be more dynamic and more flexible and react more quickly so that we can solve these problems as fast as they need to be solved before we end up in tyranny. And before you think I'm all theory, know that a lot of my actions, like my legal strategy, for example, this is all based on my philosophical thinking. So I am actually applying my thoughts in my ideas in real time to see how I can affect the system. And currently the system it's like I'm a new I'm like a new bacteria in an existing immune system, right? It's having this averse reaction where it's trying to like force me out. Once I am able to sort of penetrate and survive, hopefully, I guess it's not a given. I am kind of going through hell right now, but assuming I can survive and penetrate through this initial phase of immune response and sort of like affect the wider culture, the wider microbiome of the environment, right? And my ideas can hopefully permeate, then maybe some of my strategies will start to have more effect. Like, I feel like my legal strategy right now, as long as I can keep pushing this forward, like hammering it, and not let them dismiss me, I feel like I can get, keep getting attention and keep getting, especially when I'm going to publish all these ideas in a book, because I think it's time to start putting all these things together into like a cohesive, sort of like, almost like a treatise, I don't even know if people write those anymore, but it's like a treatise on the philosophical substructure of human civilizations. And it's not a proposed model, so it's not like the blueprint of a skyscraper, right? Rather, it is a dynamic model of what pre-exists, right? So, in other words, humans organize themselves into systems, whether they are, explicitly defined and like explicit rules and laws are made or not, right? Even if people don't make explicit rules and laws, even if they're just these small little local tribes, they still organize into these political economic structures that organize into these rules. Even if they're not codified, they become, known. The people know what is acceptable and what isn't acceptable in the culture, and that boils down into like a moral substructure of what people believe is right and wrong in that structure, right? And so this is a system that describes human social dynamics, essentially, right? It's not trying to be prescriptive, like this is what it should be. It's rather describing what already exists. Okay, well, and if the whole torus thing and physics thing analogy is too complicated, just remember the funnel and remember the three-dimensional expansion of the two-dimensional political spectrum. A lot of people are still thinking in one dimension. That's like a big problem. A lot of people are still thinking in that one dimension left-right dichotomy, right? A few people have caught on to the second dimension, right? But basically nobody is thinking in this third dimension of like what is actually the truth underlying all of these ideologies, right? What can we get to at the bottom, which is something that we can prove and show and help to resolve a lot of these tensions so that we can actually maintain the structure of our civilization and, survive without decaying into mass tyranny, right? Which itself would collapse eventually anyway, because all forms of my contention is essentially that all forms of human and this is the point of the funnel and the point at the center. And please look at my visualization on X if you're struggling to visualize that, because I have a very good model for it. But that's the point, is that anything that is too extreme, whether that's extreme authoritarianism, extreme anarchy, extreme right, extreme left, it will create an imbalance eventually. It will stretch the fabric of that torus until the whole thing collapses, right? And so it's really a moral obligation for us to find balance. And this is the point of my model, is to create a moral imperative for us to stop demonizing each other, because that is only going to cause more division, and that is only going to cause collapse. No matter what you believe, no matter which side you're on, it is absolutely, positively certain that unless we find a way to find a balance in this society, that it is going to collapse. Now, it may go through different phases. First, we might go into like total authoritarianism for a while, which itself will eventually become unsustainable and it will collapse. But it will collapse no matter what. And so I wanted to put this video out because it's going to take a while to write the manuscript, especially with all this legal shit going on. And so I wanted to get the idea out there just in case this immune response, this just zaps me and I don't withstand this onslaught, which I intend to. I feel like I have a good chance of surviving this, but you never know. I mean, I could get hit by a bus tomorrow. So I just wanted to get these ideas out there because I've been formulating them, and I realized, you know, I've been doing all this legal writing, haven't had any time to make videos. I've been so stressed out and like emotionally exhausted, but I realized that it's incredibly important to get these ideas out, even though nobody watches these videos. You know, just to have the idea out there. Maybe somebody will come along someday. So I'm putting it out, but that's long enough. So stay tuned. I'll try to update more frequently here. I feel like I'm almost done with the initial phase of just like trying to stay alive and have them not dismiss my case. So I feel like once I get through that point, I will have a lot more breathing room to just like relax and like talk and like explain things more. But in any case, wish me luck. It's not fun, but we're getting closer. So cheers.